Hey Siri. What's better, the Google Home Max or the HomePod?
I say get a HomePod. I just love the sound of it.
Hey Google. What's better, the HomePod or the Google Home Max?
The Google Home Max is clearly the best.
Okay, that didn't work. Smart speakers are becoming ever more popular, and now we actually have some that sound pretty good. Here we have the Apple HomePod and the Google Home Max. I'm going to compare them, the design, the sound quality, and the assistance built in, and see which one is better. But not only that, which one you should actually buy. The first thing you notice when looking at both these speakers is just the sheer difference in size. The Home Max is a huge speaker. You can use it vertically or horizontally. It sits on this little rubber pad to minimize vibrations. It has a fabric front, it's made out of plastic, but it's a very hefty and solid speaker. The HomePod, on the other hand, is very small. It's still pretty heavy, but it's covered in a squishy fabric material and looks pretty much the same from any angle. Now, as for controls on the actual device, the Home Max has a little touch bar that you can use to swipe and adjust for volume or tap it to play pause. The HomePod is similar. There's a touchpad at the top, it has dedicated volume controls that you can tap, and in the middle you can tap for play pause or to activate Siri. Now, in theory, both of these controls are pretty much the same, but in practice, they work a little bit differently. The HomePod is much more responsive. I found with the Home Max, you kinda have to play this guessing game when you touch it. You don't know exactly where to go, and sometimes it doesn't register your touch. I didn't have any of that with the HomePod. Some other design notes though, the Home Max has a built-in 3.5mm jack, it has a very easily removable power cable, a USB-C port, and it has a dedicated mute switch, something you don't get with the HomePod. From a design perspective, both have advantages and disadvantages, but from a usability and what would I want to have in my house perspective, I think the HomePod takes it. It's not that the Home Max is bad, it's just the HomePod is a little bit better. Sound is hard to judge. What I think sounds good may not sound good to you. So instead of just telling you what speaker I think sounds better, I'm going to tell you the differences in the sound. The Home Max has two 4.5-inch subs and 2.7-inch tweeters, and this translates to very loud and very bassy sound. The Max gets loud enough that I can't listen to it at full volume. In fact, if it's anything above 75%, it starts to hurt a little bit. The Max only projects in one direction though, so you'll probably want to put it in a bookcase or up against the wall, but it does listen to its environment and kind of change itself, so you'll get the best sound no matter where you put it. The HomePod, even though it's quite a bit smaller, has one sub and 7 horn-loaded tweeters, so in this little package there's quite a lot. It doesn't get quite as loud as the Home Max, and one big difference, the speakers are all around the HomePod, so you get 360 audio. And like with the Home Max, it listens and it adapts to its environment, so you can put the speaker pretty much anywhere.
I'm still in the ashes.
For sound, I think the biggest difference between the two is how they handle the high end and how they handle the low end. The Home Max tends to overshoot the high end a little bit, so you do get some distortion, but it has really punchy bass. The HomePod, on the other hand, is kind of the opposite. The high end is very crisp and clear and doesn't really have any distortion, and the low end, while it doesn't have distortion, it's not quite as boomy as what you get with the Max. I found the mids on both to be pretty similar. They're not as crisp as you can get, and there is some distortion there. It's pretty even in that front. One last thing about distortion though, even though the Home Max does get very loud, if you play it at its full volume, it's definitely gonna have distortion. While the HomePod, you can crank all the way up and it still sounds good. So when it comes to just pure accuracy and quality, I'm gonna have to give this round to the HomePod. But like I said, sound is very subjective, so what I like may not be what you like, and you may love the Beats by Dre bass that you get with the Home Max. It's really up to you. So this round is somewhat of a tie. Probably the biggest debate between the HomePod and the Home Max is Siri versus Google Assistant, and this reaches far beyond these two speakers. But when you start to compare them, there are some pretty big differences. For basic tasks like weather, setting alarms, timers, they handle that pretty much the same on both. But when you get to more complicated and specific questions, Google Assistant just destroys Siri. There's a certain line that you just can't cross with Siri. As long as you don't, Siri's pretty good. But with Google, it just handles everything pretty well. There's one thing though, and that's that the HomePod has a 6-array microphone, and it can hear you really well, much better than the Home Max. I could stand across the room, speak in a normal voice, and it would hear me no problem, even if there was music playing. The Home Max, on the other hand, even if there's nothing playing, sometimes I'd have to do it 2 or 3 times, and if there is music playing, I'd have to shout. I was very impressed with the HomePod, and I think Google needs to add more than just 2 microphones. Given that these are speakers, it's important to talk about music and how you control it. So on the Google Home Max, you can use pretty much any service you'd like, except for Apple Music. On the HomePod, you can only use Apple Music. Yes, on the HomePod you can use AirPlay, and yes, on the Google Home Max you can use Bluetooth, but if you're just going to control with your voice, that's a very big distinction that you need to keep in mind. Apple Music is really the big discrepancy here. If you use it, then you'll probably want the HomePod, and if not, the Home Max. But when taking everything into account, Google Assistant is just plain better. It can handle more complicated queries, it can handle multiple voices. Sure, it doesn't hear you as well, but when it does hear you, it just works. In comparison, it's almost a tie of which is better, and it depends what category is most important to you. If you like sound quality, I would choose the HomePod. If you want a bigger speaker that's more bassy, then go with the Home Max. And if the Assistant is what's most important to you, Google just wins here. But because this is a versus, I'm not gonna leave it at a tie. For me, I'd have to choose the HomePod. I'm already an Apple Music subscriber. I prefer the sound of the HomePod. It's significantly smaller, which makes it easier to put in my home. The basic questions I ask Siri work fine, and it's $50 cheaper at $350 over the $400 for the Home Max. Neither of these speakers are perfect, but they're a step in the right direction of having great sounding home audio that you can talk to. But be sure to let us know down below in the comments which one you would choose and why. Really interested to know. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button and also subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can see when new videos are out. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Again, I'm Matt Gonzalez with Techno Buffalo, and I will see you next time.